Jacob Lamontagne. This is my educational thinker presentation on Plato. Plato's name was not Plato. It was Aristocles. He was born 428 as an aristocrat in the line of at least two Athenian kings. He grew up in Athens in 428, and Pythagoras and Socrates were some of his biggest influences, aside from some other philosophers. The Socratic method is one of the main things, three things, that he's super famous for. It's famous because Socrates invented it, but he wrote it down and he used it in multiple books to try and describe ideas, not in the first, but in the second and third person, to describe and dramatize all types of things by adding leading questions to engage the audience. He did this and developed this initially because he believed people were reincarnated. Because he believed people were reincarnated, he believed that people were recalling information from a previous life, and this was his attempt to manifest that. He did this because of his second idea, the theory regarding forms, and to a lesser point, the theory of souls. There was this abstract universe he would draw information from, and he believed that all people could do it using their minds, and they would draw information from this infinitely big universe that had all the ideas there, and that's what the universe's essence and the most core essential part of it was ideas and the interaction of it with the mind, not physical empirical stuff. And one of his third most famous ideas was the mythical city of Atlantis, which he claimed was a real place in his book Timaeus, and he believed his grandfather went there, discussed it with him, and was the size of Libya and Asia combined, and was a conglomerate of various kings that lived on it, and they were just incredibly advanced, apparently. Some of his biggest impacts to education is his books, the Apology, the Phaedrus, the Timaeus, the Phaedo, the Sophist, the Symposium, Laws, and many more. But he made these, and these have been a basic building block of Western political culture and policy because of his influence. But because of also his, and here's the second thing, the impact on education, is his interaction with Pythagoras, or his ideas, and Socrates. And because of the combination of deep, interesting, abstract concept like mathematics with the spiritualism that Pythagoras did, and the interaction with humanities, philosophy and rhetoric of Socrates and his own personal beliefs, and eventually Socrates' betrayal, it would motivate him to make the Republic specifically, and it really shaped how he interacted with civics and philosophy. And then his interaction with justified true beliefs. It's a huge impact of how epistemology works today, and he invented it. His theory into practice was not really manifested beyond the book Timaeus until after the 1400s, and Islam heavily influenced Plato's sense of the idea because they were the ones who had most of his books until Constantinople fell and the rest of the world was dispersed and had it because of Al-Farabi, who got to have the concept of the city ruled by philosopher kings, and then that influenced the Muslim world so much that they were willing to put it into Latin, and from Latin it went back to Europe, and by the 1800s Neoplatonism had overtaken scholasticism and allowed Christianity to not just have Aristotelian thought mixed with Christianity with empiricism, but now had the Platonic thoughts mixed with Christianity. And some of the critics of him would be Aristotle himself, who liked the world being described as physical stuff and physical things rather than just, ideas you can't interact with. My criticism would have been, it's like, if we're reincarnated, where did the information originally come from? Because you're implying the previous life had it, but then how did that previous life get the information? He never explains it without going into a vicious regress. The other concern that people had with his educational influence have been Nietzsche, who was very vicious with Christian criticism with slave morality and how people were just making excuses for being weak and trying to switch the goalpost, as some would say today with postmodernism does, where they have kind of a victim Olympics, and that's exactly what Nietzsche was saying Christianity was doing. But what he went to, that people were going and turning to Plato for solutions to try and beat him, he was claiming that Plato's sense of the good was too abstract and a presupposition that was just slave morality for the masses, that there was nothing useful, nothing good about it, because it was based on nothing except trust me, bro. And then my criticism of Plato would have been that I wish he did a much better job of explaining the natural world. He allowed people like Aristotle to trump him, and he didn't anticipate people's attraction to just understanding the world as you see it in addition to the spiritual. Instead, he relied strictly on the spiritual rather than talking about it in a dualist way that Aristotle would eventually do. But I wish that he went the extra mile because of that. We suffered things like indulgence vending and a complete domination of Roman Catholic rule for hundreds and hundreds, of years, because there was nothing contested until like the late 1400s, and eventually 1800s is when it finally took off. And we couldn't have that done because there was nothing like Platonism to compete with Aristotelian thought. And until it did, Roman Catholic thoughts and indulgence vending ruled. And there was a lot of people that abused Aristotelian thought because it wasn't competed with something as strong as Neoplatonism. That has been my educational thinker presentation on Plato. Thank you very much.